Alrighty. We're getting right down to it here. It's a little bit of a LSD from, this is a PlayStation 1 game called LSD, the Dream Simulator. Fascinating game. Really just meant to be experienced, kind of like a proto walking simulator. There's no combat, there's no puzzles to solve. It's literally just you wandering around. And I see that it's screwing up my green screen there. That'll change once the scenery changes. But it's really just you just walk around and you experience different things, and it's basically supposed to be a dream. You know, you're basically simulating a dream, and you know, at the end you kind of get a rating of your dream. Probably get to that. Yeah, it's actually, this is the end of this person's dream, and it kind of tells you, it tries to, you know, say, let's see here, what kind of up or down, static. Anyway, it basically in a very rudimentary way tries to psychologically profile you. Because, you know, you could have, instead of falling down the waterfall there, you could have walked up to one of those trees and touched the tree. There is a kind of way to complete it. You see how that light, it was like flashing in that area there? There is, you know, you can save your game, and there is kind of a way to reach a kind of completion state. And it basically, it's just allows you to say, okay, I've seen all the various weird things that this game has to offer. You know, here's a great example, because sometimes it's not just a 3D world. Sometimes it's just a video clip. So that was the end of that dream. Now the person's going to start day 2, and instead of seeing a 3D world, you see this. LSD in the top left there. But this is the inside of a VHS tape player. And that's the tape being run over the head there, then being read. That's cool. But all the, like, Sony, I'm sure all that stuff said Sony or something. You know, I should do a 24-hour stream playing LSD Dream Simulator. I should do that. And you see, then you fill out another spot on your dream board here. Guess that's what you can call it. Things are very randomly generated, though. Like, you'll, like a dream, you know, you'll have reoccurring things that happen over and over and over again, and you can try different things. Dream emulator, not dream simulator. Big difference. A lot of the dreams start inside this Japanese house. I believe you can turn off the head bobbing and footstep noises. I think you can turn those off. See, now we're back in the green field, but it's slightly different. You see, we're not looking at trees. We're just looking at a big open green field. Anyway, highly recommend checking it out. It's a very rare game, so if you don't want to buy it, you can of course download and emulate it. So this is the one about socialism. Richard Wolff here has some great videos. His website is Democracy at Work on YouTube. Check it out, like and subscribe. I think, you know, the next thing I'm going to show is this really great debate between Richard Wolff and
this is Democracy.
Paul Krugman. New York Times Paul Krugman, like that means a fucking thing. Yeah, the same New York Times that lied to us to get into a war, kept information from us because it was profitable or otherwise, you know, beneficial to them. the so-called paper or record that's perfectly okay lying to people. But we're not going to be watching that. We got an older video from 2019 where Richard Wolff goes over the 3 basic kinds of socialism. And this is going to be informative for me as well, because I agree with a lot of socialist solutions to various problems. But, you know, I do have a hard time distinguishing between the various flavors, you know, and you'll see a lot of commentators, and I'm definitely included in this, confusing certain socialist ideas with communist ideas. So I thought this would be informative not only for you, but also for me. And then we have one from January 31st of this year, talking about the socialism issue. I watched a chunk of this, but I couldn't remember it if you asked me to. So let's go ahead and get to it. Whole hour of Richard Wolff, man. Big dick Richard Wolff. That motherfucking big dick. Love Richard Wolff, man. He's great. You know, anytime I need a smile on my face, I think of Richard Wolff spanking Destiny in a so-called debate that really should have just been Destiny's first actual class. Destiny gets schooled on something he should full well know about, being Mr. Smart Guy. That was really entertaining. So fuck you, Destiny. Just a quick reminder. You're an ignorant son of a bitch who doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, and your solutions are neoliberal, so why don't you just go to fucking MSNBC? Why would I listen to Destiny when I could just listen to Anderson Cooper? Telling me to vote Pete Buttigieg? Pete Buttigieg, huh? You think just because you fuck bitches, I'm gonna listen to you and your fucking political recommendations, and you're telling me to vote for one of the slimiest, most pathetic, hollow neoliberals to have ever existed? You're a fucking moron, Destiny. Suck my dick, bitch. You didn't know how I felt on Destiny. There it is. Let's go ahead and get into it. Got my grandma neck here. One sec. I love this picture.
Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives. And I'm your host, Richard Wolff.
Big dick Richard Wolff, bitch.
I've been an economics professor all my life, and that, I hope, has helped me prepare for these programs. Today I want to do a special kind of program, a program devoted to a topic that is becoming more and more important in the world, but particularly here in the United States. I take my clue from a recent poll by NBC and the Wall Street Journal, who worked together on these polls. And this
is 2019, by the way, so when he's saying recent, keep that in mind.
Poll showed that 25% of voting Americans believe that socialism is an attractive quality in a candidate when they think about who they're going to vote for. Well, that kind of blew my mind. After over half a century of endlessly demonizing anything and everything having to do with socialism, that 1/4 of the American voting population feels they would be drawn to a candidate who said of himself or herself, I'm
That's
a
Bernie,
socialist,
by the way, of course,
tells you something about change in America beyond what a million other surveys might show. So socialism is on the agenda. And so I think it might be useful to become clearer than the most of the conversation has been about what socialism means. I wish I could sit here and tell you that this is the definition of socialism. But if I did such a thing, you should turn the program off and go elsewhere. Because anybody who tells you that this is socialism is either ignorant or misleading you. Socialism has been around for 150 years. It has spread all over the world, and the end result, inevitably, is that different people mean different things by that term. Look, capitalism is what we call the economy in the United States. It's also what the leaders of Saudi Arabia call their economic system. And it's also what the people in Ireland call theirs, and it's also what the people in Nigeria call theirs. Therefore, it obviously means different things to different people. So I want to devote this program to going over with you the three major ways this idea of socialism is understood, because those ways are relevant today. Those ways are fighting it out amongst themselves in terms of the allegiance and feelings and thoughts of people around the world, and they're going to shape our future. So here's the first one. In this view, socialism has to do with the government. That's right. The government is to come in and regulate, control a private capitalist economy. That's right, an economy governed by private enterprises owned by private citizens who trade with one another in an institution called the market, where they buy and sell their labor, their work, their products, their services. That's right, it's a capitalist economy, private enterprise, markets, but one in which the government is brought in. Some people mean socialism by that. And they mean particularly that the government is brought in a certain way. Number one, the government is to regulate what the private enterprises do so that they are less self-serving, profit-oriented, and are more socially concerned. That's why minimum wage is something socialists
This sounds like the kind of socialism that I support.
Always supported. Many of them want there to be limits on how much prices can be raised by corporations or how much profits can be earned by them. And the second reason socialists want the government to come in is to redistribute wealth, because capitalism has this tendency to concentrate wealth in very few hands and deprive the mass of people. So the socialists want the government to come in using taxes and using government spending to do a bit of redistribution, to equalize a system that turns unequal very quickly.
Yeah, because capitalism inherently will do that.
So for these people, socialism means that the government comes in, regulates and taxes to make what we might call capitalism, because it leaves business in the hands of private enterprises and markets, but we could call it capitalism with a humane face, capitalism with a certain welfare focus, the welfare of all the people. And here are some examples. Denmark, Norway, Germany, Italy, France. Those countries are often referred to as socialist. Their governments are often governments of socialist parties, and that's what those parties mean, that they will have the government do this regulating and redistributing. That's one concept of socialism around the world. It's pretty close to what Bernie Sanders means in the United States, or what Jeremy Corbyn means in Great Britain. But here's the second one. In the second view, this first one doesn't go far enough. Because, yes, the government comes in and controls things and redistributes, but it's in a perpetual war, which the government often loses with those very private enterprises who try to get around the government regulation, who try to get around the government taxation. We're all familiar with those examples of companies, for example, Amazon, which has earned billions in profits the last 2 years and paid absolutely no taxes to the United States government. Indeed, this last year, they're getting a refund in excess of $100 million. So we know that private corporations do everything in their power to use their profits, to use their political power, to undo, to evade all of those socialistic regulations and redistributions. And this has led some socialists to say you have to go further. It isn't enough to regulate and redistribute. The government should, here we go, directly take over the enterprises. There shouldn't be private enterprises because those will always be run for the profit of the private owner.
And I believe in a hybrid system where a government, is allowing certain institutions to be private and and hoard wealth, and other institutions are too important to be, given to the private industry, like healthcare.
If you want the economy to serve everybody, then the agent of everybody, the government that we all elect, at least in theory, should take over and run the businesses so they behave in the way that's good for everybody, and there isn't this perpetual war between a regulating government and private enterprise.
Yeah, because certain things it makes sense, other things it doesn't make sense. Like, the government shouldn't be regulating ice cream stores. That doesn't make a lick of sense, right? I don't need to buy my ice cream from Uncle Sam. But when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to medicine, when it comes to police, when it comes to firefighting, I shouldn't be asking a private industry who's going to be, trying to, make this as efficient and cost-effective as possible. I don't want cost-effective healthcare. I mean, I do, but I don't want my doctor worrying about, well, should I give him surgery A or surgery B, right? Obviously, I'm worried about waste and fraud and corruption, but, I want the best. That's the one that I want. I want the most. If the best is the most expensive, that's the one that I want when it comes to healthcare. I don't want my doctor saying, well, your insurance covers this or your insurance covers that. It's not the best, but you won't die immediately. That's not good enough for me when it comes to healthcare. I want to splurge a little. I'm okay with that. And a private healthcare is not interested in splurging unless you got the dough. They don't give a shit about you or your health or your life. They don't care about that. They care about their profit. So, anyway.
And the same argument says we shouldn't allow the market to decide who gets what, because a market always delivers whatever is scarce to the people with the most money.
That's right.
It's an institution for those who are rich and who stay that way by using the market. So these socialists go further. The government should take over enterprises, literally own and operate the factories, stores, and offices, and instead of the market deciding who gets what, it should be planned in terms of what we want for the society as a whole.
This
These
works for
kinds
certain
of
industries, but not all.
After the 1920s, took the name communists to signal that they went further than the other socialists in order to take over, through the government, the apparatus of the economy. So some people mean by socialism government regulating a private capitalism to make it more humane, to make it less unequal. And other people say, no, socialism means, for them, that the government takes over the enterprise and plans the distribution of output rather than leaving it to the market. And this second group of socialists often, not always, but often takes the name communist to show how they're different from the first group. And in those kinds of examples, the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China, and for parts of their history, Cuba, Vietnam, and so on, are examples. Now let's get to the third kind of socialism that's contesting in the world today. To become the important kind, to become the kind believed in and followed by most people, to win your interest as well. And this approach is in a way an evolution out of the other two. It's a kind of critical evolution because it is advanced by people who see some merits in the first kind of socialism, government regulation, the second kind, government operating enterprises, but say, we don't think that's enough in one way and it's too much in the other. Here's how it's not enough. It's not enough because it doesn't change the workplace, the place where the mass of people do their economic thing, using their brains and muscles to transform objects into the goods and services we all need to live the lives we want to live. It doesn't change it enough. Meanwhile, it does something too much. It gives too much power to the government. As a government that has this much power to regulate and redistribute, let alone a government that takes over owning and operating, is a government that runs us the risk that it'll do a lot more than these economic things, using its power for political or cultural controls of a society that we have seen and we don't want again.
Yeah.
Well, then these kinds of socialists have a new focus. For them, what will really make a difference, what will take us beyond capitalism and be a better way of organizing society, focuses on the enterprise, the workplace. And it goes like this. We have the economic system we have, with its good points and its bad points, in large part because we don't allow democracy into the workplace. And these socialists say capitalism never did that. Capitalism is a hierarchical way of organizing an enterprise. A few people, the owner, the shareholders who have the big blocks of shares, they run capitalist enterprises. The mass of us have no control at all, and they run it for them. And the way to change society to make it better is to have the people who work in an enterprise, all of them, one person, one vote, have democratic control of the workplace as just as important as having democratic control of the community in which you live, the neighborhood in which you exist, and so on. This kind of socialism is micro-focused. It says, let's not talk only about the government and private enterprise. We don't mind private enterprise. The government doesn't have to control everything. There has to be some coordination. But the big issue for us, say these socialists, is the transformation of the workplace, the socialization of the workplace, so it becomes a community run democratically rather than something run by a small number of people who put their benefits, the so-called bottom line, as profits for them rather than a good life for everybody.
Is this democratic socialism? Hello, Stargazer Steph. It's good to see you. Hey, you got Richard Wolf emotes. That's cool.
Okay, those kinds of socialism are arguing with one another for your attention and your allegiance. To be interested in socialism doesn't mean you're necessarily the believer of one or the other. Most real socialist societies have mingled the control function of government with the ownership function of government.
Yeah.
What most experiments have not done is really tried that other kind of socialism that revolutionizes the workplace, brings democracy to the workplace for the first time, and says that's the way to get beyond the limits of capitalism. Its inequalities, its instabilities, its injustices. So the question that's being fought out is not the question capitalism versus socialism, or at least it's not only that. It's also a struggle going on among these different definitions and meanings of socialism that are just as important to what's going on as the so-called struggle between capitalism and socialism that was so crucial in the last 100 years.
Yeah, so when you're speaking to a right-winger that's just calling you a commie, no matter what you're talking about, don't waste your time, okay? Nod your head, smile, and end the conversation, okay? Because there's a lot of nuance here in the discussion about socialism, you know? And frankly, if capitalism wants to stick around for the next 100 years, it should really look into more socialism, because capitalism inherently eats itself. Just so everyone's aware, if anyone's watching this, I am not a communist, okay? But the failures of capitalism are, if they're not apparent to you already, start paying attention, because capitalism will gladly start eating away at itself and destroying itself and taking everybody along with it if socialism doesn't come in and buttress it in certain ways.
We've come to the end of the first half of Economic Update. Stay with us. There will be a continuation of this conversation when we come back. And please remember, support us on YouTube, Economic Update.
Give them that
Your
like.
support there. Make use of our
Give him
website.
that like, give him that subscribe.
democracyatwork.info.
Do it up.
And rdwolf with 2Fs.
Democracy at Work.
And as always,
Big Dick Richard Wolf. Just type that into Google. It'll come right up.
our special thanks to the Patreon community that supports us with its interests and its active encouragement for what we do. Our thanks. Welcome back, friends, to the second half of this special program devoted to the different kinds of socialism that are at play in the world today, competing for our attention and competing for our allegiance for those of us that are interested in doing better than capitalism.
Yeah.
I want to ask this question in our second half. How do these different kinds of socialism, these different ideas of what socialism means, how do they affect us? How would they affect us? How have they affected us as individuals working and living our lives? So let's start with the first one. We can call it moderate socialism. Some people call it democratic socialism. It has a lot of names, but it was that kind we talked about first in the first half of this program. Namely, when the government is called in, you leave enterprises in the hands of the private owners and operators, as you have in capitalism. You leave the market as the basic institution to distribute goods and services. But
And I believe that this is a stepping stone. This should be the goal because it's obtainable. And once we've reached this, then we can start talking about, well, do the people actually want communism? Do they want centrally planned everything? Or is this good enough for the people? As long as the decision being made is democratic at heart,
But the government comes in to regulate and to redistribute the wealth because of the tendencies towards inequality that capitalism without government tends to show us over and over again. I think the things I would like to stress there are that on the one hand, people in that kind of a socialist society are usually quite supportive of it. If you look at the Scandinavian countries and a number of the Western European countries that are kind of prime examples
as a whole love
of
our
this
system.
sort of thing.
I'm
or
an
you
American
look at the image of
moving
what
to Canada.
Bernie Sanders wants for the United States, and he himself refers to Denmark and so on as models, at least in part. You get the impression that what this means is that working people have kinds of two sources of well-being. On the one hand, they work and earn a wage or a salary, and on the other hand, they have a very generous supply of public services made available to them by that socialist government. If you look in Europe's history, for example, Scandinavia or France or Germany or Italy, you will see that it was the socialists who pushed for the national health service that they have, the unemployment compensation.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't the capitalists.
The subsidized transportation, the subsidized public education. These were all ways for the government to come in and make life better for the average person. So there's a sense of support for the socialists in those countries and for the socialism they have, which is one explanation for why it has been so durable over the last century in which it was established there. The problem, if you like, and we have to...
Not with that attitude, it certainly isn't. Only with nonviolent direct political action can we create change. That is, in fact, the only time we've ever been able to create change. We certainly haven't created change with a bunch of defeatism.
Weigh the costs and benefits of all of these. The problem for this kind of socialism is that it is very insecure. Let me explain. If you leave the ownership and operation of enterprises in the hands of private people, then those private people are, in all cases, a very small minority of the society. They sit at the top of the economic system. They're the ones who own the bulk of the shares. They're the ones who sit on the board of directors.
Bezos, Musk, all the oligarchs.
And they are constantly struggling to use those positions they have which includes getting the surplus.
Absolutely not, Stargazer. Did you not hear what I just said? Nonviolent, direct political action. Voting is just the start. Look, you're new here. I have a 3-step program that I'm constantly talking about that needs to be implemented. Step 1, inform yourself. Step 2, join or form a progressive organization in your area. Step 3, put in the work. Make signs, join a union, march for your union, march for single-payer health care, get out in the streets, make phone calls, actual political activism. So no, I'm not, who do you think I am? What do I look like? Bitch-ass Destiny? Huh? Time waster Hassan? Pedophile Vosh? No, I'm advocating for real activism, not sit on your ass and jacking off on just chatting. Real activism. That's the only way we'll ever make change. And in fact, that is the only way change has ever been made, is with nonviolent, direct political action. So no, not just vote harder. Absolutely not.
Or profits of the society into their hands to diminish the regulations, to be freer to do things their enterprises lead them to believe will be profitable. They don't want to be hemmed in by regulations, and they don't want their wealth taken from them by a redistributive government. So they begin to push back.
It sounds like you've given up. This is not your channel. If you want a pat on the back for giving up, go somewhere else. In this channel, we focus on finding solutions for the difficult problems, injecting nuance where nuance doesn't exist anymore, finding context for the reason as to why we want to do things. Real intellectual debate, real activism. Okay? You want reinforcement on why you should embrace nihilism? This isn't the place. This is where you find out how you should abandon nihilism. Find hope, find meaning. So if you want to give up, you go ahead and go somewhere else, because we don't do that here. We fight into the last breath, okay? I'm going to die on my feet, not on my back.
And they have the incentive, but they also have the resources to push back, and so they take away the very socialist benefits that have been captured in earlier periods of their history, which means this kind of socialism is fundamentally insecure. Here's a second problem of that kind of socialism. Redistribution. Governments that use taxes to move wealth, at least in part, away from those at the top and spread that wealth out more evenly across the society. This leads to incredible social tensions. Wherever redistribution happens, that is a result. I use this example, I'm going to use it again. If you take your child to the park, and you have 2 children, and you take them to the park, and now it's time to get ice cream cones, and if you get the ice cream cones and you get 2 of them and you give them to one child, and then you say, whoa, this isn't fair, let's redistribute, and you pull one cone away from the one child to give to the other, you're creating a level of tension you would never have had to deal with if you'd given each child 1 cone at the beginning. When we have a government step in to redistribute, we invite intense social struggle, intense social animosities amongst us as a people. It's not smart. And that kind of socialism is constantly bedeviled by struggles among people over a redistribution you would not have if you distributed less unequally to begin with. Let's turn to the second one, the communist alternative. When the government takes over running and owning enterprises and plans the output. Well, there what we have is interesting results. First, these sorts of economies have been stunningly successful in achieving one of their central goals, which is economic growth.
Yeah.
I mean, this comes as a shock to Americans, but it has to be repeated so we are not living in a fantasy world. The 2 most spectacular stories of economic growth of a society going from poverty to wealth in record time is the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and the People's Republic of China. Wow. Communist China, Communist Russia, are examples in which having one central authority, the government, mobilize and focus on economic growth, of ending centuries of policy of poverty, have been extraordinarily successful. Those are their achievements.
Economically.
They can get economic achievement on a scale that other societies, both capitalist and the other kind of socialism, the regulatory kind, have not been able to achieve. That has to be faced. That is a virtue of those systems. But they too have their problems. Let's look at them. They
Please.
generally tend to be less unequal than the other kind of socialism usually can be. So they have that in their favor. But in those societies, you have arrogated, you have taken an extraordinary amount of economic power and put it in the hands of a government.
Yeah.
And the question has been, and that has been answered now, that putting that amount of power into the hands of the government runs the risk that such a government will use its economic power to also dominate politically and culturally. And remember, if the government takes over the enterprise, it means that instead of the private individuals running the business of the country, it'll be government officials who do it. And that is still a small part of your society. It means a minority. In one case, it's private capitalists. In the other case, it's government officials is calling all the shots.
Yeah.
And that is...
And I have a major problem with that, right? Because we've seen the result of that. I mean, look at China right now. You can't fucking sneeze while you're attending the Olympics without China fucking, 3 people from China walking, government officials telling you what, how to sneeze, when to sneeze, all that shit. Where's the individualism? It's erased.
Politically dangerous. And we've learned that lesson. So in this struggle to ask yourself what life would be like if you were in the first kind of society, a socialism a la Scandinavia, versus the next kind of socialism, the communist variety as you had it in Russia and China, working people, you and I, would have to ask, what will life be like in that kind of arrangement? We don't have mass unemployment. We have government services on a scale we don't in other societies, and we have economic growth. But we also have the uncertainties, the instabilities, and the concentration of power that might be a problem.
Yeah, and democracy is like the first thing to go. Yeah, there's lots of protests in China, right? But nothing seems to change because they don't have to change. There's simply no mechanism to actually create democratic change. They like to pretend that there is, but we all know there isn't. Their officials are assigned. So as soon as that concentrated power starts going in the direction we don't like, we literally have no mechanisms to stop that, right? So they just keep reinforcing itself. And then inevitably, if you're too loud and too effective at changing that system, say through protest or activism, they purge you. They get rid of you. You're a malcontent. You're an annoyance. Very, very dangerous stuff. I believe in checks and balances and transparency and democracy. That's why I don't believe in communism.
Now let's ask what the third kind of socialism would mean for us. A socialism that focused on the enterprise and the workplace more than on the overall running of the society.
What's the name for this?
Mean
I wish
for
you'd
you
tell me.
And I to go to work every day, 5 days a week, 9 to 5, and walk into a place where we don't just have a particular assigned function, do this, work there, live with that machine, do this activity. We would have a particular function, but we would also be part of what owns and operates the enterprise.
I see. So he's talking about co-ops. I've worked for co-ops. I like co-ops. I support co-ops. If you want to create one, but from my experience, there is a problem with some people don't want this kind of freedom. Some people want to work within a hierarchy. They don't work well. You know, they're not manager types. They're not leaders. And those people are often, you know, if you're not taking ownership of the co-op you work for, those people are often left to the wayside.
We would have to be a leader, not a choice. Just as it's not a choice for most people to go to work and do the particular function at the job, you would not have a choice here either, in the sense that a job always means both a particular activity within the division of labor at your workplace, but also your participation in making all of the basic decisions.
And like, if you want to look at how, you know, certain people in the, you know, don't want to be leaders. So what do you do about that? You know, how do you can't force a person to care, to take ownership. You simply can't.
What to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do with the profits that you helped to produce, just like every other worker. You'd be part of a community at the workplace. You'd have one vote for each person. Decisions would be made democratically. The design of the work, the pace of the work, how you interact with other people on the job, all of those things would be decided collectively and not imposed by a minority.
Yeah, and I really like this idea, and I think more co-ops should happen, and I would support the creation of more co-ops through tax incentives and other things. But you know, I'm curious to hear what he thinks the negatives are.
You'd have to think, is that a better way to work? Is that kind of workplace something that has attracted people for centuries to co-ops, to worker co-ops, to collective forms of labor? What does it mean in your own life? I think the idea of this third socialism is to achieve something in your daily life that the other two socialisms never did. That when the first kind had the government regulation, or the second kind, the communist kind, had the government take over, the transformation of the workplace never happened. You were still the worker who comes and does what he or she is told for the 8 hours and then goes home. This is a new world, this third kind of socialism. That's why it's probably the one you're going to hear most about in the years ahead, because it is new and it doesn't have quite the problems that the other ones do.
It's got different problems.
But here are some problems that the new one will have, too.
Okay, thank you.
How do these worker co-ops, these communities in each factory, in each store, in each office, how do they interact with one another?
Yeah.
Will they use markets to buy and sell from one another? Will they employ some kind of collective planning of how they interact with one another? It will be a new world, this socialism, because it is composed of people who are really in charge of their economic lives in a way that was never true under capitalism and not true under other forms of socialism either, because they were focused on running the system, on the overall, and not on the particular in each workplace. We'll have to discover in this new socialism, if and when it happens, how we interact with one another when all the details of the work are collectively designed. When everybody is a boss as well as a bossed person. When we rotate whatever particular functions have to be in leadership so that we don't get one group that are leaders all the time and everybody else who isn't. All of those things will change. We will have to learn new ways of interacting with one another. But if the idea of socialism really is, as it was once said it would be, to go beyond capitalism, to do better than capitalism, well, then that third one is by far the most transformative for people's lives.
Definitely.
Of the three that are contesting.
Definitely.
But in any case, here's the bottom line. The next time you hear somebody talk about socialism, pro or con, please be aware and make sure you enter into that conversation, knowing that there are different kinds, knowing that they are very important in their different implications for what it means to be a human being and to be an active member of a society. Socialism is on the agenda, but more accurately, socialisms are on the agenda, and being aware of them and dealing with them puts you one step ahead of those who think there's one universal kind There hasn't been for decades, and there isn't one now. Socialism is an important topic. That's why we devoted an entire program to it. I hope this has been useful and interesting to you, and I look forward to talking with you again next week.
Yo, and this is why we're watching. Okay, this is why this is the News Underground, not just chatting with your parasocial buddies. Okay? You know, Stargazer there wanted to hear what she wanted to hear. She didn't want to hear solutions. She wanted a pat on the back for giving up. We don't do that here. Okay? We look for solutions that are viable, that people want to vote for. Okay? Screaming into the void. The void is so black because of people like her giving up. You want to hear the things that make you happy? Go to these assholes. Okay? You want to hear real information, real news about the real world, not the fantasy world? That's why you come to the News Underground. So here we go. Second half of the show is going to be this other program here from Richard Wolff, the socialism issue in 2022. And this will be interesting to hear. You know, we got little bits and pieces of, you know, of his opinion in 2019 about socialism in the modern day. You know, this was kind of like, you know, Bernie fever was still, you know, kind of hot. So this is really interesting now to get his perspective a couple years later and see what he has to say. So let's get into it.
Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives, jobs, debts, incomes, our own, and those of our children. I'm your host, Richard Wolff.
Big day.
I want to begin today's program with something happening to many cities and towns across the United States, and nothing better encapsulates the decline of our capitalist economic system than what I'm about to describe to you. I'm going to take the example of Kalamazoo, Michigan, a city of about 75,000 people. And in case you're interested in getting more details, which I hope you will, Time Magazine's double issue of January 17th and January 24th of this year carries a good article that gives you an overview of what I'm about to summarize. The problem that Kalamazoo has, like so many other cities, is that corporations and the rich have been able to use their wealth and their power to reduce the amount of taxes they have to pay to the city where they either work or live or have their business. And it has produced the predictable outcome. The cities, deprived of the taxes they could and should get, were corporations and the rich to pay their fair share, have to do what? Well, one of two things or both of them. They either have to shift the burden of taxes on average people, which they usually do, or they have to cut the public services they can provide to the local community because they're not getting that money from the wealthy. And usually most cities do a little bit of both, but they reach a kind of dead end after at least a few years when the mass of people will not tolerate more and more taxes, even if they don't know exactly that it's being shifted onto them because you're not getting the money from corporations and the rich. So now they all, sooner or later, have to cut services. That's why your garbage isn't picked up the way it once was. That's why your schools don't have the kind of budgets they need, your firefighters, your police, and so on. So now comes the unique capitalist solution. The same wealthy corporations and individuals in Kalamazoo, and I'm going to give you their name in a minute, came up with a clever way to take all of this one step further. I'm talking about William Parfett and William Johnston. They're known as the Two Bills in Kalamazoo. They set up something called the Foundation for Excellence in Kalamazoo. Modesty is not their strong suit. And they gave it a lot of money. And they distribute to the city, on average, about $25 million a year in what, here we go, they think they can do to help the city in its difficulties. Well, let's first look at this. Who's William Parfet? Well, he's a longtime executive in the Upjohn Pharmaceutical Company, which merged into something you all now know as the Pfizer Corporation. That's right, the one making millions by overcharging us for all of those vaccines. That's what you want running your town. And the other one, William Johnston, is the owner of the Greenleaf Group, which happens to own the Radisson Hotel in downtown Kalamazoo, don't you know, and other properties there too. So the two richest guys in Kalamazoo avoid paying their taxes, turn around, use the money they didn't pay in taxes to give it to a corporation they own and operate, which can then dole out the money in whatever way they think is appropriate for the future of that town.
That sounds very
fascist. We have
fascist.
a name for this in American history. It's called a company town. But this time it's just whoever the richest folks are in town. And
Hey there, welcome from D-Live. Looks like you're, from Turkey?
Cap it all off, the money that they didn't pay in taxes, that they give to the foundation that then doles it out to the local politicians to keep them on a short leash, that contribution to that little foundation they set up, that lowers their taxes elsewhere as well. Talk about hustling the system.
Yeah.
City after city in America is becoming...
Yeah, they don't pay taxes. They form a corporation that then is basically a lobbyist to the government so that they can make rich people's lives even easier. Yeah. Oh, yeah, they're there to help people. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
Dominated by a few rich people who have in this way done an end run around any claim for democratic control of our urban areas that anyone could reasonably advance. I turn next to President Biden, who said a few days, maybe a couple of weeks ago, how happy he was that in 2021, the year just ended, we added 6.4 million jobs. Well, you know, there's a difference between an honest politician telling us about an urgent issue like unemployment and a huckster who's telling us something advertising agents usually do.
That's right.
You know, advertising is a system in which they tell you whatever the positive is about what they want you to buy, and they hide or deny the negative.
Yeah.
That's not an honest conversation. That's a hustle to get you to part with your money. And you and I both know that.
Yeah.
We want our politicians not to be advertisers. We got too much of that as it is. We want honest conversation, which advertising is the opposite of. But we don't get that. And it's not just Mr. Biden, of course. Trump was even worse. Obama, they all do it. So I want to unpack this one. Is it true that we got 6.4 million more jobs in 2021? Yes, it is. Is that the end of the story the way Mr. Biden wanted to tell it?
It is
no,
not.
It isn't.
It is not.
Why not? Because in the year 2020, the one just before, we lost, get ready, just shy of 10 million jobs. So if you lost 10 million jobs in 2020, the first year of the pandemic, and you got back 6.4 million jobs in the second year of the pandemic, you're still down 3.5 million lost jobs that have not come back. That's a lot of jobs.
It's a lot of people.
A lot of people, a lot of families, a lot of towns, a lot of cities. This is not to celebrate. This is to be honest. We have a long way to go. And let's remember, we have a bigger population 2 years later than we did before. We need more jobs, not 3.5 million fewer jobs. That's what an honest politician would have told us. But it's even worse. We're not being told about what we call the labor force participation rate. That's the percentage of people in the working age who are looking for work and have a job versus those who have simply quit and walked away. In the beginning of the pandemic, the numbers, they don't matter, but I'll give them to you. The participation rate was 63.4, and today it is 62. That's 3 million or so jobs. There they are again. People have given up. They've gone out of the labor market. That's a very serious problem. We're all still here consuming, but millions fewer of us are working or intending to work. These are serious problems, not covered over by a huckster telling us the one piece of good news you can figure out in all of this.
Yeah.
And then there's the fact that by talking this way, you don't face it as a problem, and therefore you don't talk to people about the solution. Because, you know, there's a very easy solution to the 3.5 million at least that are without work, that had it, that needed it, that still need it. You know what that is? It's to do now what this country did in the 1930s.
A work
public
program.
jobs program.
A work program.
How
Yeah.
about the federal government hire the 3.5 million people? You know what? To green this country, to make us have better insulation in our homes.
Infrastructure.
To do something about the failing infrastructure we heard so much about. Come on. And you know what? We could give them all $17 an hour.
A modest
minimum
wage. A modest
That's
wage.
higher than the one we have, and that would be real competition for our private employers.
That's
'cause
right.
They'd have to do just as well. Otherwise, no one would work for them.
That's
since
right.
you could get a government job at $17 an hour.
That's right.
And in case any of you think that's extreme, which it isn't,
It
let me
isn't.
tell you quickly about West Hollywood, California, a city. And they've passed the minimum wage for their town. Here it is, $17.64
Oh my.
an hour.
Oh my, it's the end of the
Tell me that
world.
isn't possible. That's what hotel workers in that town get, and they don't get that in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Socialist hellhole.
Then there's the polls I want to
$17.
talk to you about. But before I do, I want to mention, because one of you asked me, that in the United Kingdom, in Britain, there is the same kind of disintegration we have in this country. They have one of the worst records on fighting COVID, right up there with the United States. They have moved to the right politically. The divisions in their society are incredible. And they voted a Trump-like kind of character. He's different from Trump. Trump's distinctive by his red tie and his big belly. Mr. Boris Johnson is distinctive by the fact that he doesn't understand the concept comb and brush, and he makes a thing out of that. And that, by the way, is probably his best feature, because it's downhill after that.
Yep.
And he is now suffering the same kind of loser problem that Mr. Trump did. He is now down to 23% approval rate in the polls, because he got caught. First, he rushed the country into Brexit, promising it would solve their problems. It made them worse. Then he told everyone back in May that there has to be a lockdown in Britain because the COVID was so terrible. And while he forbade more than 3 people to gather in one place, he was having big drunken parties, and he made a terrible mistake.
Oh.
He didn't check who was at them, and so it has gotten out into the press, and the poor Mr. Johnson is heading down into the toilet.
Yeah, and his excuse was that he didn't know it was a party. Oh, I wanted to know. I didn't know. People literally laughed at him in Parliament. The whole Parliament just cracking up. Ridiculous that he thinks that he'll get away with it, and so far he is. Now, where's the challenge to his leadership? This buffoon. You know, if we don't do something, if lefties, you know, of all the spectrums, right, even the neoliberal left, if they want to keep being relevant, they got to grow some nuts, okay, and actually start pushing back on these fucking idiots, these oafish morons that just walk all over us. Where's the pushback?
Why is this interesting? Because, you know, the British Empire reached its peak 100 years ago, but it didn't understand that it had reached its peak. So it kept trying to go on as if it still were the great British Empire. And that only hastened its demise. After World War I, it became a debtor. It owed more money to the United States than it could ever repay. And that was a sign you aren't the big empire anymore. But it didn't face it. It didn't struggle to figure out how to manage decline. So with World War II, which it thought it was winning, it lost the entire empire. No sooner was the war done than India, under Mahatma Gandhi, said, bye-bye, we don't need this anymore. The British tried to stop it. They were defeated. And then they were defeated in every other corner of their empire. Asia, Africa, Latin America, didn't make any difference. And now they are what? A cold island, wet, off the mainland of Europe, more and more isolated, more and more, as the unkind critics put it, Washington's poodle.
Oof.
They could have had a very different outcome, but they would have had to face that the peak was over. Why do I tell you this story? Because the United States is now at that same point. How are we as a nation going to handle the decline of what was a nice ride up in the 20th century, but isn't there for us anymore? The baton has passed somewhere else, and you all know where. That's the big issue. We've come to the end of the first part of today's show.
I mean, you know, I think you're saying China. I think there's a lot of debate there in terms of like, okay, where does the power still reside? I think it's undeniable to say the United States is declining. But I think it can be put up to debate about where the other countries, the other, you know, first world countries that are competing with America for world domination, basically, you know, where are their strengths over America? To say that, you know, China has completely usurped America is incorrect, right? Same thing with Russia. Can't really think. I mean, what other major empire is even challenging America's hegemony, right? So I think that could be put up to debate in terms of, you know, where are they dominating America and where is America still quite strong? I think it's undeniable, though, that the peak of America's heyday of economic dominance, of political dominance, military, I guess we're still number one, right? That's really not up for question. But after getting defeated in Afghanistan, I'm not as comfortable saying that as I once was. Defeated in Vietnam, Bay of Pigs. You know, we can blow something up real good, but we can't seal the deal. You know, it's like those handsome fellas that bring home all kinds of ladies, and they got the erectile dysfunction or they got whiskey dick. You know, they bring them home, can't seal the deal. You know, and that's the case with our military conflicts.
As always, I want to thank all of you whose support makes this show and others we produce possible. To learn more about the different ways you can support Democracy at Work and this program, Economic Update, please go to patreon.com/economic update, or even better, visit democracyatwork.info.
Like and subscribe, folks.
I also want to remind you of
like
our
and
recently
subscribe.
released hardcover edition of Understanding Marxism that is available now, along with several other books we've published, at democracyatwork.info/books. Please stay with us. We will be right back.
Uh. Big dick in the house. Uh. Uh. Uh.
Welcome back, friends, to the second half of today's economic update. I want to talk a little bit about the implication of what recent polling in the United States has shown us. It seems that the majority of Americans are at least agreed on the following. They don't approve of Mr. Biden. They don't approve of Mr. Trump. They don't approve of the Republicans. And they don't approve of the Democrats. Therein lies something significant I want to kind of pull out. What's going on? My best guess, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure this out, is that the majority of Americans, correctly in my view, understand that this political system we have is so utterly out of touch with what the real problems we have as a society that it's kind of irrelevant what they say, what they do, how they posture, how they pretend to attack each other or do. This is all a kind of shadow game that more and more Americans are too busy to pay much attention to.
Yeah,
because
and most
look,
people just check out. It doesn't
seem to matter which one is in there. The rich get richer, the inequality deepens, the crappy jobs remain crappy. No one is punished for the big failures. COVID is an unbelievable failure in this country where we haven't done as well as most other countries, even though we're richer than they are. Nobody is punished. Nobody is held accountable. The blame game is more and more irrelevant and people tune it out. No one was punished for the fact that we had an economic crash together with the pandemic, another crash of the umpteen we have had for which nobody was prepared. We're even running around this country today, 2 years plus into a pandemic. We still don't have enough tests. We still don't have enough. I mean, it's beyond words. And there's this sense that the political system is irrelevant, except to provide ever more money to keep this sad system going. Look, this kind of poor government, late government, it didn't matter all that much in the United States between 1820 and 1950, maybe even 1970. The American economy was on the way up. The American economy was growing. The rest of the world, not so much. And even when it was, the United States, it was so big it dominated. But that's not the case anymore. We are an economy that has passed its peak. And however hard it is to get our heads around it, that's the reality. So we need more government intervention to help manage the downturn, because it isn't the nice ride that the upturn was. And we need to think about how to do that. Not ad hoc when there's a crisis, which is how we bring the government in, but over the long run. And here's a warning. If you don't do that in a rational way,
people are going to get hurt.
Suffer in the U.S. the decline into secondary status that our forebears, the United Kingdom, have been living out this last century. They've ended up a very small, sad residue of what the British Empire once was. Didn't have to go that way, but their commitment to keeping the government away so that private capitalists can have the day is costing them as a society, literally, as I talk.
True. Facts.
I want to use the bulk of today's second half of the program to answer a question many of you have been sending, to talk about socialism. This other of capitalism. It's been around a long while, seems to be coming back now in various parts of the world, something about which a level of nonsense is spoken in the United States that's downright embarrassing to me. I was born in the United States. I've lived and worked here all my life. It's embarrassing what a taboo it is. People haven't thought about it, read about it, learned about it, and yet speak as if they understand it in ways, as I say, that are, above all, embarrassing. So I want to address that in a summary way to make sure we all are on the page. Socialism is the number one alternative to capitalism. It emerged pretty soon after capitalism itself became a big thing in Western Europe back in the 17th and 18th century. Took a while to catch up to capitalism as its other, as the alternative to it. But when it did so with gusto. And it has been an important alternative criticism of capitalism and an alternative to it ever since. And it is that today. So let's look at it without the usual American hysteria about dealing with this in a normal, rational way. Socialism is two things and has been those for quite a while now. Number one, and this is how it began, it's a movement of criticism. It says basically that capitalism, which has had its achievements and made its progress, is now holding back human progress. In other words, we can do better than capitalism. And human beings can and should be proud that they have felt they could do better throughout the history of the species we call human beings. And we have quite a nice thing to show for this commitment to do better. And there's no reason, the socialists tell us, to think that that's all stopped now, that we shouldn't think about doing better. And that's what socialists do. They think we can do better than capitalism. So in the 19th and 20th century, socialism emerges as what it already was before, but it became publicly so, as the number one alternative, with socialist political parties spreading to every country of this earth, varieties of socialism emerging. I'm going to have more to say about that. But with the Russian Revolution in 1917, just over 100 years ago, socialism was split. Part of it remained a critical movement, as in, for example, the Socialist Party in many, many countries. But part of it took on a whole new identity, a government. So some socialists were busy criticizing capitalism. Others were busy setting up governments, setting up societies that would be different from capitalism. And those are two very different tasks. And they have a lot of tensions to work out. And those tensions are with us to this moment. There are socialists whose focus is on criticizing what's wrong with the capitalism they work within and how it could be better. Bernie is that. AOC is that, and many others. And then there are socialists who are in power, whose critical momentum was strong enough to get them elected into, or maybe in some cases by revolutions, to become the government. I want to stop here and mention them because in the United States, this is very poorly understood.
True.
So I'm going to give you an example of places today where socialism is in power, where socialists are the government and have been elected and put there either by a vote or by a revolution or by both. Ready? The last general election in Germany, the number one political party at the end of the elections, only a few weeks ago, was the German Socialist Party, now renamed the German Social Democratic Party, but there's long history as the German Socialist Party. So the most important economy in Europe, the number one political party, is a socialist party. In Portugal, another European country, there's a three-party coalition. The strongest party is the Portuguese Socialist Party. Its coalition partner number two is the Portuguese Communist Party. And the third member of the government of Portugal is the Portuguese Green Party. Do you understand? This is a socialist government in Portugal. Then there is China, the number one contender of the United States, which calls itself socialism with Chinese characteristics. Then, just to mention a few other kinds of socialism, Cuba, Bolivia, Chile. I mention them all because in right-wing America, socialism is equated with one country, Venezuela, as if somehow what you could say about Venezuela covers everything. Now, mostly that's ignorance, but it's also malevolence.
Yeah.
It would be the equivalent if I said,
Bad
let me
actors.
tell you about capitalism, and I'm going to use the Philippines, Paraguay, and Liberia as my examples. How long would that last before somebody with half a brain made the obvious criticism? Socialism has three basic varieties in the world today. If I had more time, I would go into all the history, but I want to make sure the three are...
I agree with you, Lost on Earth. I mean, there's a lot of aspects that you could say are, you know, socialism over there in China, but I think the authoritarianism is the thing that shines the brightest in China. I think if you want to try to promote communism, I don't think you'd be looking to China as your, you know, shining example of what that looks like as a success. You know, it's like, oh well, they're killing it over there in China. Yeah, with your social credit score, with your getting black bagged if you're a Muslim Uyghur, you know, with getting you know, beat nearly half to death if you're a political dissident of any kind. I don't know if you want to be using China as your example as a, you know, a success of communism or a success of socialism for that matter, because I don't think it's either. I do think they have a heavy capitalist bent mixed in with a nice healthy dose of authoritarianism.
Understood.
Welcome back, by the way, Lost on Earth. Thank you for being here.
Number one, socialism regulates and limits
Facts,
capitalism. It leaves the enterprises owned and operated by capitalists. All it does is say, you can't go this far. For example, you can't pay below this as a minimum wage. You must pay taxes like this. You must give your workers paid vacation. You must give them a health insurance. You must. In other words, as it is called often in Europe, socialism really is capitalism with a human face. And that human face is imposed by a government. That's what we call Scandinavian socialism. That's what Bernie means when he talks about Denmark. That's what Western Germany, France, Italy, Spain, that's what they do. Socialism is capitalism with a governmental constraint. Then there was the Soviet Union. That was a little different. There, the socialists weren't satisfied with regulating private capitalists. They told the private capitalists, go away. You don't own anything anymore. The government is going to take over and run the enterprises. That's another kind of socialism.
Yeah.
Not
Go ahead and watch the VOD if you want a full explanation of the differences, you know, and Richard Wolff does a great job of explaining the differences of these different kinds, you know, democratic socialism, communism, and worker co-op style of government. You know, and yeah, it's you know, this is why we're watching, you know, Big Dick Richard Wolff. Man knows what the fuck he's talking about. And he body slammed Destiny. So, you know, anybody that can take a big fat dump on Destiny without even trying is AAA plus in my book.
what they have in France or Germany or Scandinavia. It's what they had in Russia for a while. China is a hybrid between those first two. That is, it has a huge private capitalist sector regulated by a socialist government, sort of like Western Europe and Scandinavia.
I agree with you,
But it has another sizable sector of its economy
It's obtainable.
owned and run by the government. That's a bit like the Soviet Union was. So think of hybrid and think of China's logic, because they've explained it. We don't want to make the mistakes we think Western Europe makes, and we don't want to make the mistakes we think Russia made, so we have this hybrid.
Okay, he doesn't have enough time in this video to do it, but I would certainly hope, you know, if he was given enough time, he would acknowledge the incredible faults of the current Chinese system. Because if you just take this out of context, you would think, well, he just thinks China is just the bee's knees and the perfect example. I don't think that's the case. I'm almost certain that Richard Wolff would have plenty of criticisms for the extreme authoritarianism and complete lack of democracy that currently exists in China. I mean, the organization that he's repping here is Democracy at Work. And could you even say that in China? Could you even stand on a soapbox and say, you know, we should be more democratic? Or would your ass get black bagged and dragged into a fucking dungeon? You know?
Last kind of socialism is a critique of all of those I've just mentioned. Not that what they all did was wrong, but they left something out. They changed the government, they changed the regulation, but they didn't change the workplace itself, the daily reality of the office, the factory, or the store. And
so this is so interesting because this is, basically just a different framing of what he did in that first video from 2019, explaining 3 different types of socialism. So these are the perfect 2 videos to be playing back to back.
That is a failure. That is an omission that modern socialism now has to focus on and correct.
Yeah.
There has to be, and this is the nicest way to say it, the democratization of enterprises. No more handful of people at the top who are the boss. Nor does it matter whether these people are privately citizens who are put there by shareholders or they're government officials. Whichever one they are, and it could be either, the crucial issue now is to put the working people in charge. Transform these enterprises into what we in America call worker co-ops, where the workers directly, one worker, one vote, make the decisions, what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do, how to distribute the revenues and profits the enterprise achieves. That can be done democratically. It should be done democratically, and a real socialism would require it. And that the Soviet Union didn't do, and that Western European, Scandinavian social democracy didn't do, and the Chinese neither. And therefore, this is a new kind of socialism. But if you're going to talk about socialism, all of those have to be part of what you're discussing, or else you're sharing ignorance.
Boom! That's why he's
Thank
the big
you very
dick.
much for your attention.
That's why he's the big
program
dick.
was of interest and that you can partner with us by sharing it.
Goddamn Richard Wolff.
I look forward to speaking with
Love
you
this
again
man.
next week.
That's why he's the big dick. All right, yeah, to answer your question here, let me get some tunage here. Oh, yeah. Okay, so you asked, I'm by no means pro-China or anything, but I'd like to play devil's advocate. I'd like your thoughts on material conditions. For example, what does the poor Chinese man care for freedom when his biggest concern is food on the table? Meantime, here in the West, if you broke, just die in the streets, I guess. So here's why you should care beyond your immediate material needs. Your children, the future of your children, the future of humanity. It's not enough to just have your immediate needs met. If we as a species are to exist for the next 1,000, 10,000 years, we need to think about what our actions now, what they do to our future. What kind of world are we building for our children? And even if you don't plan on having children, what are you doing for the human experiment, for humanity? If we just focus on our immediate material needs, eventually we will run out of resources. Think of Easter Island, the perfect example. All they thought about was their status symbols. They thought, well, if I have a big status symbol, I'm going to be a success. Other people will see me as a success. So they cut down all their trees. They destroyed all the animals on the island. They ruined their food sources, and they had to leave. So what happens when we have that same attitude towards planet Earth? We suck up all the resources. We only concern ourselves with our material needs, our material pleasures. We don't make sacrifices. We don't ask our leaders to make sacrifices. What happens? We die in a pile of garbage. So that's why, even if your government is putting food on your table, and punishing everyone else around you, that's why you should care. Even though you're getting fed, you should care about, well, what direction does all this eventually lead to? What about my kids? My kids' kids? My kids' kids? What about humanity? That's why we need to fight for a system that is equitable, flexible, modular, transparent, checked and balanced, but democratic. Because human beings ultimately can't live under a boot. We can do it for a little while, but we can't do it forever. The only way you're going to get human beings to be on board with your ideas is if everyone feels like they've gotten a say in it. If everyone feels like this system is fair, at least somewhat. That's why democracy is the best worst system. 51% say yes, 49% say no. You got 49% disappointed. It's the best we can do. Till we can all plug into a hive mind, I guess. We can't allow, and we're kind of seeing a similar, similar phenomenon here in America of, well, we're just meeting their material needs. We'll give them entertainment. We'll give them, cheap, McDonald's or, Kraft macaroni and cheese. It's fattening, but it fills your belly. And for a lot of people, that's good enough. What happens is, 500 years of that, 1,000 years of that. What happens when we run out of macaroni and cheese? We never asked our government to think about what happens when we run out of macaroni and cheese. So what do we do when we run out of it? That's why we need to find systems that work for the most amount of people in a democratic and transparent fashion. Yeah, as far as government democracy is, it is what it is, but would be amazing to democratize the workplace. I think that's essential. I think Richard Wolff is right. It's, it is kind of the next step of democratization. I still think we should absolutely provide for the less fortunate, though. Well, and I agree, because a society can't have true equity, can't have the real, you can't say your society has, the people's support. If most people are moral, most people don't want to see someone dying in the street, but yet we have a system where people are dying in the street. So how can you say that your government represents your people as best as it can when there's such disparity between what an individual feels like? Yeah, I mean, no one wants to step over a drunk heroin addict, and everyone feels bad. Not everyone, but the majority. Like I said, the best worst system democratically. If you were to have 100 people in the room and you ask them, do you care if you have to step over a heroin addict? Maybe you'd get 70% if everyone was being honest. 80 or 90% of people were being dishonest. But that's currently not reflected. And I believe if a government wants to have control, if a government, because I mean, what we're talking about an entity controlling people's lives. I think if that entity wants to enjoy that power, then it needs to have the moral authority. The capitalist owners are going to fight tooth and nail, not let the co-ops be a thing, though. That's why we got to participate in nonviolent, direct political action. Okay? Yeah, it's not going to be easy. The fight is there. The fight is ours to fight. That's why we need fighters, warriors. Okay? We don't need defeatists. We don't need the people that say this is good enough and then stop fighting. We need fighters. People that push back. It's the only way. Because you goddamn right they're not gonna give up that power. They're not gonna give up that power without a fucking fight. So expect it. Embrace it, frankly. We have no choice. The alternative is the destruction of our soul, what we would call that, you know, our being, our person, and then finally the destruction of our bodies. It's a tough fight. I'm not sugarcoating a goddamn thing. They'll bring that violence right to us, and they'll massacre us in the streets, just like those early Union fights. It's either this fight or eternal slavery or serfdom. Yeah, we got Netflix. Yeah, we got DoorDash. We got our Popeyes delivered to us. Plenty of marijuana, plenty of alcohol, but we're not free. And a government that only focuses on that and then worries about all the other stuff, and just doesn't really care about that other stuff, is ultimately corrupt and will defeat itself. I mean, imagine what 20 years of the Trump administration will look like. That's what we're facing. We're facing a permanent Republican majority. They're going to start a war. They're going to who knows? But we can all say safely that it's completely unsustainable. If they turn violent, though, I believe violence should be avoided, but I'm not so starry-eyed to believe that it's going to be bloodless. People died for weekends off. Work, yeah. Can't imagine what it'll be for co-ops. It'll be a struggle. That's why they call it that. We can't sugarcoat it. We need to accept this is the fate. This is the fate of the activist, of the progressive activist who believes in democracy. We are fighting oligarchs and fascists and neoliberals who believe in the military-industrial complex as a source of income for your country. They need to be defeated politically. And when they fail to defeat us politically, they will try to defeat us militarily with weapons. But what happens? What happens? What happened at Penn State there? That infamous image of that woman crying over her friend who was massacred. Creates martyrs. It can create change. I don't want it. But hope and praying and screaming for out to humanity about we should be better than this. They don't care. They're sociopaths. They laugh at that. They think that shit's funny. Remember that woman screaming about Trump? That infamous meme image of her just screaming, primal screams. They thought that shit was real funny. All right? We got to accept that that's the fight that they are going to bring to us. I don't like it, but that ain't going to change it. What will change it is my 3-step program, folks. Step 1, inform yourself. Listen to people like Big Dick Richard Wolf. Step 2, join a progressive political organization in your area. And step 3, put in the fucking work and prepare for that fight. Sure, maybe you're not a frontline person. Maybe you don't want to get smashed in the face by a police riot shield. Those people need food. Those people need financial help. Those people need signs to carry. You can make some signs. Those people would while they're on the front lines, you could be knocking on the doors. You could be making them phone calls. There are solutions to these problems. None of them are easy. Okay? None of them are. The right, the end of Jim Crow. That wasn't easy. Women's right to vote. That wasn't easy. The 8-hour work week. 8-hour work day. 40-hour work week. That sure as hell wasn't easy to obtain. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears. We do it. We do it because it's morally correct, and it is our only hope at a sustainable future. I don't mind getting smashed in by piggies. Got not much to lose anyways. You actually have everything to lose. You actually have everything to lose. They're already burning books. They're already telling you what you should and shouldn't read. The Supreme Court is soon going to tell us when we can and can't have children. They're going to destroy Roe v. Wade. Soon the fascists will tell us who we can fuck. Soon the fascists will tell us, you know, what is and isn't a thought crime. It never ends. The only solution is nonviolent, direct political action. And I'm so sick and tired of people trying to tell me that it isn't. It is the obvious solution. Get in the streets, join an activist movement, demand change. Okay? Don't put your support behind people that say demand less. Like Elizabeth Warren, like Emma Vigeland. Kick them to the curb. Next, the Republicans will try to mandate all women wear chastity belts and only have a husband or father may have the key. Yeah, they're already, I mean, you got people like, what's his nuts there? Oh, what the fuck is his name? He's that bearded son of a bitch. Talking about, you know, government mandated, arranged marriages. You know, government mandated girlfriends. I also start working half an hour, but I'm chilling here for a bit. Sorry, I can't stay as long as this time. This is the end of the stream. So thank you for being here. We're just doing an hour on socialism. Just I found some really relevant videos from Richard Wolff, and I wanted to cover them. So there you go. Thank you for sticking around the whole stream. Mistopheles, welcome back. It's good to see you. I'm just going to move this one guy here. He's driving me nuts. I don't know where the hell he is. Okay, never mind. I'll take care of that later. When is your next stream, though? That's some BS incel cuck shit. You goddamn right. But they're winning. They're winning. You know why they're winning? Because, you know, and you know, look at the chat log. I don't know if you can see the chat log. You got someone in here by the name of Stargazer Steph. Listen to what she said. Our government is captured by corporatists. Not going to happen. When Richard Wolff was talking about socialist alternatives. When I brought up nonviolent direct political action, she says, what? So vote harder? Cynically. And I go, I don't think you listen to me. I said, we need to perform activism. She goes, already in a union, that's captured too. Give up. She's just given up. She wanted a big pat on the back because she's given up. No, I've already tried. I've already tried and it didn't work already for me. Sorry for the camera. I see. Yeah. You know, we're not gonna get a better future allowing the oligarchy to lie to us and tell us that this is good enough when we can't get any farther. I told her, it looks like you're looking for an excuse to give up, and you're not going to find that here, because I'm going to die on my feet. I'm not going to die on my back with my ass sticking up in the air waiting for it to get fucked. Unless I was into that. But I'm not. When it comes to domination, I really do need to find a better... A lot of people like to get fucked in the ass, you know? So I got to find a better comparison. Nothing wrong with that. Got to give a chance for people who have given up to turn around. And if they insist, they can give up out of the way. That's what I'm saying. If all you have is rebuttals and excuses as to why you're going to continue giving up, then get the fuck out of my way. Period. Get the fuck out of activists' way. Don't give me your bullshit as to why you can't contribute. Oh, I did this, I did that, blah, 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 blah. I got an excuse for everything. Not good enough. The future for my children and my children's children depends on my action. And collectively everyone's action. So anyway, I'd like to give Lost on Earth the Garbage Fuel Award of the day for literally being the only person that, you know, well, besides you, Mistopheles, there, showed up at the very end. But I would like to thank Lost on Earth for coming in at the end here, giving me some Thank you so much. Oh, no, you're not garbage. You just enjoy the cool, refreshing taste of garbage fuel made from 100% garbage juice. Hey, I just got here. Well, good timing, Mr. Goduck, because I'm just leaving. Senior Sock, thank you for that follow. Do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Last time I'm going to say it. Bad luck. Next time you could be garbage like me. Garbage fueled, not garbage. Like I said before, it's a 3-step motherfucking program, okay? Number 1, inform yourself. Number 2, join a progressive political organization in your area. And number 3, put in the work like Big Dick Richard Wolf. Put in that fucking work. Don't let these fascists win without a fight. Fuck fascism. Fuck fascism for real. You hear me, Madison Cawthorn? Fuck you, bitch. But getting down every time they hear about young low up in their town. Props up in Cali, New York back to Dallas, Houston and New Orleans. About the scene. On my pocket is the green that I'm stacking all the things. So 20 city tour bus, making sure I don't move